Okay, I'm gonna start. Some people will be coming in, but let's start anyway. My name is Roeland. I work with Plone. I've worked with Plone for a very long time and in various capacities, but one of my tasks is also to be on the accessibility team. The accessibility team tries to make sure that Plone is accessible according to all the most recent standards. Plone 5 is accessible according to WCAG 2.0, which is the most recent standard. There are still some minor niggles, as there always are. But more importantly, Plone 5 is actually also this close. Hopefully on Saturday we will have reached it when the first day of sprinting is done, to being ATAG compliant, which is another word salad thingy. But that basically means that people reliant on screen readers will be able to actually create content, not just visit the site, but also create content. So that's hugely important, but my talk today will be more wider on what accessibility actually is and why it brings unexpected side benefits to a lot of your sites. Why it's not only something that is sort of niche and something like, ooh, we have to do this. It's actually quite vital to any site, and it's also something that's not a one-off. So, access for all. And that's what we want. We want everybody to be able to access our content. Welcome. So, in my definition, what is accessibility? Accessibility is actually nothing more than good user experience. If you design your user experience the right way, you will have your accessibility done rightly. There are extra considerations to take in concerns for people with various levels of ability and disability, but anything you do to enhance accessibility will automatically enhance the usability and the user experience for everybody else as well. And there's a lot of reasons to do that. The first reason is, and I do realize the irony of having animated GIFs in a talk on accessibility, but they do have alt tags. The first is very clear. For if you're working in government, it's the law. If you make sites for public authorities, for universities, for a lot of other organizations, you have to comply with accessibility rules. There is no way around it. And you can actually be sued if you don't. Now, being sued is one of the worst motivators out there. I hate it. Some accessibility companies use it as a marketing ploy. I think that's evil. But there is no way around it. It is the law. So you will have to do it. But there are so much better and more positive reasons to have good accessibility. First of all, let me introduce you to probably your most well-known blind customer. Google doesn't have eyes. By the way, the others also. They're also bigly fans. I think that's a word now these days. I'm learning new words as I watch your election cycle. And all in keeping with that, let's not leave out the Russians while we're at. Basically, all search engines are, you could consider them blind users. They index your site like somebody with a screen reader. Which means if your site is inaccessible for a screen reader, that's what Google will see, that's what Google will index, or Yandex, or Bing, or any of the others. So making your site accessible will instantly increase your search engine optimization. It's really a good thing to do. But then again, we tend to think of accessibility as something that you're born with, or you have a terrible accident. Yes, there are people like that, and we should deeply care about them. But there are so many other ways in which you are what I call situational aware, have ability issues. You can be in a situation where you're not even aware that you need accessible tools. One of the most common is you're out. You're in the park. Your contrast ratio has just decreased by about 80%. You'll be glad that the site has thought of a high contrast mode, or that it's even visible and it's not all done in light gray letters on a white background, because you will see absolutely nothing while you're in the park. If you're targeting well, basically it used to be a millennial crowd, but nowadays everybody, chances are they'll not be sitting at their desk anyway. They'll be on the move. They'll be using a variety of devices to access your content, which makes them having problems, because we all are on public transport in cramped spaces, which means you don't have your normal navigational abilities, because you will poke somebody's eye out. That's not a good idea. So you need better accessible tools, which are quite comparable, or which also help people who have motoric problems. So once you have those in place, you will also improve your mobile navigation. Or in an airplane. Nowadays you can even get Wi-Fi in an airplane. I'm not quite sure that's a good idea. People start yapping on the phone in an airplane. But it's the future, and there will be more people using your content in weird places. There's estimates that about half the population at least has partial accessibility issues. Reading glasses, sight of vision, some things where you cannot see things or are only half able to see things. If you only design for a young 100% vision or 20/20 vision, as you Americans say, you're missing out a large part of your target audience, namely the ones with money. Which would be sad. There's also something what I would call temporary accessibility issues. It can be that you suffer from RSI because you've been working too hard. It could have been that you slipped because it was snowy. You might have strained your wrist and you're not able to use your mouse. You will only experience that hopefully for a few months, but during those few months you will be really grateful that somebody has thought of integrating some accessibility measures so that you can actually still access all the content that you're used to. And then probably the bigger one of all of us, unless we get hit by a bus first, will suffer from what I would call temporal accessibility issues. Meaning we get older. We all get older, and with old age come various interesting side effects, such as diminished eyesight, diminished control sometimes of your arms. It can be that you get a shaking disease or any kind of thing, and I hope you all live a really, really long life, but hopefully all of you will also want to access the web when you're 92, in which case there should be good accessibility in place. Something also which counts as an ability challenge is if you're using a language in a language that's not your first. It could be that you don't really recognize the script, or that you have trouble understanding it because it's your third language and you're only halfway fluent in it. Then it helps if people have thought of clear, concise, crisp descriptions and not made it lengthy and wordy. So language, depending on your language and the language of the content you are, could be seen and should be seen as an accessibility issue and should be treated accordingly. And then also one important aspect of accessibility that people often don't realize is cognitive differences. There is a growing number of people out there that have various levels of cognitive difficulties. It can be dyslexia, it can be other kinds of understanding of text problems. You're again missing out on a huge part of the population if you only write it for people with perfect command of your perfect chosen language. That's stupid. So
you may be going at 80 miles per hour down the highway reading your phone.
yes, that may also happen. So you could be that person being distracted and only half glimpsing at it. So again, you will be glad that something is easy to understand. And you may be working in an office garden, one of those open plan offices. I hope you don't, because I hate them, but some of you may. The percentage of videos that are watched without sound, and this is according to YouTube research, they know what they're doing, it's 85%. That means if you have video content on your site and you haven't done closed captioning, they will have no clue what it's about if all the information is in the audio. So it's actually really dumb these days to have a video without closed captioning on. It used to be considered some kind of niche thing again, like, ooh, those poor people that are deaf, we need to do something for them. No, it's 85% of people who are not accessing your audio. So you might as well close captioning. Luckily, YouTube now makes it a lot easier. They have something called auto captioning. It works in an amazing number of languages. So basically you upload a video to YouTube and you say auto caption and it will do language recognition, and it's amazingly good. It gets to like 95% of what you actually mean. You will have to hand correct a few things where it misunderstood, but that's a lot less work than doing it all by hand. So there's tools available to do it. Please do it. If you're not doing it, you're missing out, and that will be so sad. I think that's the most tweeted thing that a certain orange guy does in your country, but this really makes me sad when I see sites that are not accessible in the least. So, are we all fired up to improve it? Let's get to work. So you think like, yes, now we're going to go and do it. And you start up the first accessibility checker that you have. These days and age, we are really lucky. There are more tools around than ever to help you with checking your accessibility. But if you do it without first thinking, you will be depressed quite quickly. Because the first time you will run a validity check on almost any website, it will give you grief, like honest grief. I wish it weren't so, but all the current, most of the accessibility checkers that are around, whenever something is an error, they say critical! Big red flashing lights, critical, and you're thinking, oh my god, what have I done? And it turns out, well, actually the contrast is like 5% off. You should improve it, but it's not critical. And I've met a few people who gave up, who were simply like, oh, we're never going to fix this. So then your accessibility checker has actually achieved the opposite of what it was supposed to achieve. I sincerely hope that the tools will get a bit more polite and be more so like, almost there, instead of critical. It's a bit more motivational in it. So if you start... What?
Their product is fear, though.
Their product is fear, yeah, but yeah, they shouldn't. Also, checkers give you a limited view, and yeah, again, it's not. So my advice is stay calm, don't panic, grab a towel, do one thing at a time, and it doesn't have to be perfect. It's really not a good idea to be demoralized when your site has not a grade A notch. Just see it as a chance to improve it and gradually improve it. And I will show you some tools that will help you. But stay focused on the process, and gradually it's actually not that hard to do if you focus on a few different areas. First of all, you should, of course, watch your theme. That's the colors, the contrast, and that kind of thing. Another big item where you should look is structure. Structure meaning you should put in areas and hints that say like, this is actually my main content, this is my menu, this is my bottom line, this is aside, this is not so important. So you give hints.
Where's that picture?
I think it's somewhere in the US. Yosemite, name a park here.
I was backpacking somewhere at a set of lakes, and that looks awful.
Another big theme is, where you should look is where you're using your images and your video. Images should come with alt tags if they have meaning. Video, as said before, should be subtitled. And again, the cost and effort to subtitle video has been dramatically reduced, so you really have no excuse anymore not to do it. And an often overlooked part of accessibility is actually your text. The actual textual content, to see if that's understandable to your target groups and tailored to your target groups. So how do we go about this? This is another, I picked some random American, I think this is Yosemite, yes. So how do you go about it? Well, first you have to identify where things are not optimal at the moment. Then you have to see how to avoid making these mistakes in the future. How do you avoid them? By automating and monitoring. So it's relatively easy to have a site being compliant at the start when you launch it. And then your editors go to work. And actual content gets generated. That's where the hard part starts. You will have to help them, and automate and monitor are the ways forward. It's just like automated testing. This is where you can make the process as easy as it is and also become a routine. Once it becomes part of your routine, it's much easier. So first we'll go back to the theme. This is what we call classical accessibility. You have all these errors and gotta catch them all. These are what you do with the contrast checker and the color blindness. Yes, you do have to catch them all, but don't freak out. Honestly, if you're relatively close to it and there's some room in debate, it's debatable whether something is a large font or a small font. And the regulations say like, this is okay for a large text and this is for small text. Well, actually, the size of the text nowadays depends on the device. So it's not a hard rule. You should aim to be clearly readable. But yeah, if some checker out there says it's not okay, it could be the checker's fault and not your fault, so don't freak out over it. There are some tools, we'll come back to the tools a bit later, and I have links to them as well. There's some really good tools to sensitize your designer. They can use some tools. One of my favorites is called No Coffee. It's a browser extension, and you can actually have little sliders that say like, ooh, I have blurry vision. Ooh, I have a little bit of color blindness. And then your designer will instantly see in the website how it looks. And usually that means that then they see the error of having like razor thin fonts in dark gray on a light grayish background. That's never going to work, even with people who have the slightest imperfection in their site.
Did you say no coffee?
No coffee. As in, nope, no coffee. And there's another called Totally, but it's spelled with Tota and then 11Y. So for accessibility. Links come at the end, so I'll name them again. So at this stage, browser extensions are your tool of choice. Your designer will know how to use a browser. That's how you start with the theme. How do you work with the structure? Structure is, again, that's using what content goes where on your site. My advice is use both ARIA roles and HTML5. There's more and more HTML5 tags being launched that specify things. So not everything has to be a div anymore. We actually now have tags for a menu and for content and for what we're sort of asides and portlets. But the support for it varies greatly amongst screen readers and also amongst browsers. And especially mobile browsers are not too good at it. So better be safe than sorry and just use both ARIA and HTML5. And be aware, rules also change. Luckily, the people who make these rules are not some completely bureaucratic group of idiots who set the rules in stones. One of the most annoying things that used to be there, you couldn't put the ARIA role is search straight onto a search form. That was like, why? It's a form and it does search. What would be more natural to say role is search on the form? So lots of people complained loudly, and since December last year they were like, yeah, actually that rule doesn't make sense at all. We will change the rules. So it's been in place for almost a year, but not all accessibility checkers have been changed. They will still shout at you loudly for putting role is search directly on a form tag, but it's actually completely legal. So rules do change. ARIA needs some insight into your content. You actually have to say whether this is like the main content, whether this is an aside, whether this is essential or supplementary towards the content in the main content or not, or whether it's completely separate side block. So you cannot do ARIA on lorem ipsum text. You will actually have to know what goes where in your final site before you can assign the proper roles. And my strong advice, focus first on the things that really break and really make a site inaccessible for blind people. Ajax, pop-ups, unexpected DOM changes. I will totally forgive everybody if you have not put a role on a certain aside or have... That doesn't make a site unusable. It may make it slightly clumsy to use. Fine. Focus first on the main things that make a site absolutely impossible to use, and work from there. And forums are one of the hardest because, yes, blind people do want to buy stuff and they do want to have access to and they want to get in contact with you. Images. As said, use captions, use auto-captioning. It's available in English and 12 other languages. It's great. For images, make sure there is an alt on every image that has a meaning. Make sure there is no alt on every image that is purely decorative. That is the right way. If you say there has to be an alt on everything, you're doing it wrong. If an image is purely decorative, it should have, by definition, have an empty alt tag, and you might as well use an ARIA role of hide. Because, yeah, blind people do not really need to see decorative images. They're not that interesting for them. But yeah, the rules on alts are not that hard, but it is hard because, yeah, you have to have some process in place. You have to train your editors to say, like, please fill in alt tags. Plone does what may be one of the more unpleasant things of Plone, which I don't like, is if you don't fill in an alt tag at the moment, it will actually use the file name, which is kind of rude if you read it out to a blind person, because usually the file name will be like image a bunch of numbers. So, I mean, you can avoid that by giving it a meaningful alt tag. But yeah, we should really think whether we want auto-generated alt tags. They might not be the most pleasant thing to do. And there's new challenges coming up, and that is in the whole use of SVG and icon fonts, because some of them, or most of them actually are not decorative. So they have meaning. And sometimes it's hard for the user interface to actually put an alt tag on them. And we should really do that. There are ways to make accessible SVGs, but it's an evolving field. We're not quite there yet. The standards still have to crystallize. But it's getting more and more important because everybody's using them because they're great. But yeah, we will have to work on how to make a handier way for editors to actually create alt tags on SVGs and icon fonts. So text. Text needs care. This is a famous quote by Blaise Pascal. The more care you spend on the text, the more clearer you can make it. And there's also, nothing really helps like having a text or a writer's mind. I don't know if you know the book, The Elements of Eloquence. It's a great book by Mark Forsyth. It tells you, and it's really helpful for a non-native speaker like me, what the adjective order is in English. It's opinion, size, age, shape, color, origin, material, purpose. And it has to be that order. So you can have a lovely little rectangular green French silver whittling knife. If you make any alterations to that order, you sound like a maniac. All you English native speakers use this instinctively. The rest of us, but none of you could write it down. But we have to learn these things. So as size becomes before color, you cannot have a green great dragon. You can only have a great green dragon. It's one of the things, use some language tools and read some language books. It will really help you shape up your web content. So use writing tools. Writing is a trade, and shape up your act if you are writing for a website. It will make it much easier for people to comprehend. And integrate those into your pipeline. Do proper spell check, but also do proper grammar check, and also do proper language check. Check for offensive words, check for, I will name some tools there, but there's more and more tools out there that will actually help you ensure the quality of what you're writing and what your editors are writing. So, and they can be integrated directly into the browser, they can be integrated into your continuous integration. So you can actually say like, you used a cliche that's so totally not done, or this word is completely offensive, could you please remove that and change that comparison? And then keep on doing that. Accessibility is not something, it's not a checkbox, it's a process. You're never done with it unless your site is done and you can archive it. But as long as your site keeps having new content, it means you're not done with accessibility. It is part of your process. And as in any process, it's important to avoid it becoming annoying and a rut. That's just, yeah. So manual tools are great, sort of these browser extensions, but it's not a solution that scales. If you have 20 editors, that's not going to work. So you really want to automate all the things you can do. So why do you automate? Well, in order to have more time for the things that cannot be automated, because humans are far better at them than computers. So that's how you do it. The way you do that, of course, is continuous integration. That's what we have learned in the Plone community, and what everybody is moving to. Continued integration is the way forward. Luckily, there are mature frameworks in place that will actually integrate with what we're currently using. Jenkins, whatever your choice of continuous integration and testing framework is. So you can use Jenkins, GitHooks, you name it. And luckily, you can also suppress the error levels. So you can say, actually, you keep shouting at me because I haven't gotten around to fixing this little contrast item. Shut the hell up. I know it. And just give me a green build on all the important stuff. I know I should be doing that, but sorry, it'll have to wait till I get an intern. That's fine. Honestly, that's fine. Try to work from the top, the most important things down. So what are the really tough ones? What is really hard these days are single-page apps. They're becoming all the rage. They're really hard to get right. The Angular 2 and React actually have a reasonable set of accessibility in it, but it remains hard. Luckily, if you're writing a single-page app, you're probably one of the hip kids. So you probably also have a good process. And here you really want to invest some time to have some heavy-duty testing, to keep testing your accessibility in your single-page app. And if you're dealing with a single-page app, that means you have DOM changes. Please be polite. If you keep on shouting to a blind user every time you make a slight change to the DOM, they will afterwards not only be blind but also deaf, and they will hate you. So there are roles in the new ARIA that says ARIA Live is polite. That means like, yeah, I changed something, but it's not important. When they get to that part of your single-page app, it will tell them the new information, but it won't interrupt what they're doing. If you don't do that, it will interrupt whatever it's speaking to them, which is horrible. If you ever try, if you are blind yourself, or if you ever used a screen reader yourself, you will know how horrible that is when a sentence gets interrupted. It's your whole train of thought of what you're doing is being interrupted. It's not good. And again, yeah, I keep repeating this because, yeah, it doesn't have to be perfect. Leona Watson is one of the people from, she does the WordPress accessibility. She's really good at accessibility, and she also struggles with people who giving up, saying like, too difficult. And she's really like, no, just one step at a time. She's also a great talker. We now have a regular meetup called Roll is Drinks. They are at several places in the world. I can totally recommend you go there. So what are some of the tools? For the designers, it's again, no coffee. It's awesome. I hate being ironic, but it's going to be an eye-opener for your designer. Totally spelled with two numbers 1 in the place of the L, because the obvious pun on accessibility being A11Y. And there's something called accessibility bookmarklets. And they're just little bookmarklets that help you say like, oh, where are all my area roles and are there some errors in it? It really is a good help for designers. Then these are my favorite tools for casual testing. With casual, I mean, you're not a pro, you haven't integrated it, but you want to check. There is something called imaginatively A11Y. It's NPM and then it downloads the internet, or nowadays I've just been told you shouldn't be NPMing it but yarning it or something hip. But in any case, it's out there and it's based on the Chrome accessibility tools, who are quite good. Better actually are the X plugins. The underlying technology is the same, but the nice thing about is they have a plugin both for Firefox and for Chrome, and they integrate into the Chrome DevTools and into Firebug. So you will get all the reports in the place where you normally go looking for why didn't my CSS work or why didn't anything else work. So it's in your workflow and it's not some extra tool, because extra tools you tend to ignore. Now it becomes like, ooh, my CSS is broken, ooh, my accessibility is broken. It's in the same place, it's really good. And there's Opquast Desktop, which does the same. But my preference is if you're using Chrome DevTools or Firefox or Firebug or both of them, X plugin is probably my favorite. There's about 20 million more out there. I've not tested all of them, but quite a bit of them. I'm just giving you my recommendations, but I have tested quite a bit of them. Language has some good tools. One of the nicer one is Write Good. That's also an npm installable thing. You can have it in your editor. We're also using it for the Plone documentation. It's getting used more and more. It will warn you against cliches. It will warn you against passive voice and say like, hey, active voice is better. It will say this sentence is really long and complicated. You might want to break it up. After the deadline is a tool that's integrated in Plone. You just have to enable it. And it will also give you style tips. Really enable it on everything you do. You can also say to avoid offensive words, like in technical documentation. You can tell it like, master slave is not something we'll be saying anymore. Primary and secondary is much better wording. And things like that. You can integrate those with the Koala framework. Koala is a framework to do linters. Like your code people will love it. They can do PEP8 and all that stuff. But they can do, at the same time, they can do language checks. So your technical people or you as technical person, if you see Koala, you're like, this is great. It can do all your checks at once. You can say my .py files should be compliant Python, my .js files should be JS linted, and my .text files should be proper English. All in the same go. Awesome. So it becomes part of your routine. And yeah, just read more books, write more blogs, and you'll get better at writing. That's the language tools. Now we come to the fun part. Heavy duty. There's also quite a lot of them around, but most of them are continually rewriting them, which is extremely annoying. By far the best that I have found is Askatasun. Askatasun is a Basque word meaning freedom. But it's spelled a bit funny because Basques are funny like that. They like to use Qs. It's an awesome tool. It's available as a Docker container, as an Ansible script, and as a Jenkins plugin. But beware, it eats your computer for lunch. It wants like 8 gigs of memory at least, because it has Tomcat and Apache and Postgres and things. It's a full-blown solution, but you can set it to test for accessibility, all of the accessibility, but also all of your text, all of your SEO, and you can script it saying like, give me a report first thing in the morning every day. It's really awesome, and you can also use it to test single-page applications. It's really good. AATT is a framework developed by PayPal. That also works, but Askatasun is nicer. You can really script it. It will take you some time to get used to it. And as said, the setup, you need a proper virtual machine on it. I tried it on this laptop and sort of like it cried a little and got very warm. But then again, since Askatasun does almost all of your content checks, it's probably worth it. It can literally spider an entire site and say like, you have 20,000 pages. On these and these pages, you're using the wrong wording. There, somebody has forgotten an alt tag. It's brilliant. If you have a larger site, spend some resources and have an instance of that in your Jenkins or just as a separate instance. Just use Ansible to deploy it and feed it information. If you're an institutional user, you should have a loose desktop standing around somewhere which you can abuse for this. So those are my recommendations, and then I think hopefully we get out of the nobody cares about accessibility mode, because there's so much more, there's so many reasons why you should care, and there's so much to be gained from it. If you have good accessibility, your search results will be better, your users will be happier, all of your users, you're not excluding anybody, and if you're thinking that accessibility is for like the 1%, it's closer to the 99%. That was it. I'm taking questions. Yes?
What was the name of that book you recommended?
The Lila of Eloquence. Yeah, I'm looking it up right now. And the elements of eloquence.
So did you take off on the elements of style?
Yes. I'll put these up later on the web with full links to all the tools.
Looks like it's out of print, but available like on Kindle.
It's available on Kindle. I think, yeah, it's out of print, but they still have secondhand at Amazon as well. But yeah, you can have it on a Kindle or as an EPUB or a PDF. It's short, but it's really enlightening. It's at least for me as a non-native speaker, it really helps. But since watching your election cycle, I think some of you could use a bit of eloquence as well. I'm sorry, I'm not supposed to be making jokes about sad. Americans. So sad. Yes. More questions? No. If you have any more questions later on, I'll be available during the conference, and I really like accessibility. When I started out, it was like, oh, this is difficult, but now I'm really starting to love it. So you can get a hold of me anytime, and I'll be glad to advise. We have some specialists here as well. Manabu knows quite a bit about it as well. Rob Porter is always will always help you gladly. There's quite a few people. I may have missed some people here that are good. I think I have forgotten your name again in the corner over there. Yeah? Beth. There's a bunch of us around that really care, and just come ask us. And do it. Just do it. And please remember, don't ever be sort of demotivated by your first check. I've seen so many checkers that are wrong, and yeah, one step at a time gets you there. That was it.
The checkers are like pen testing.
Yes.
They're intended to terrify you.
Yes, they intend to sell you really expensive services by a few choice companies. That's why I like Askatasun. They wrote their thing, and then somebody stole their code because they had BSD'd it and built a commercial product out of it, and they charge ridiculous amounts. So they forked it and said, no, accessibility should be available to everybody, and thus it should be open sourced. And because you're just putting up artificial barriers, and weren't we in the business of removing barriers? That was the whole idea. So they're a great community as well, the Askatasun people. But yeah, there is, unfortunately, especially in the US, because you have a kind of weird legal system, there's a whole trend of trying to sort of force people into doing this by threatening with lawsuits, which is all the wrong motivator. Yes, I'm done. I'm being told off.
Phone call, the service.
What?
Have them do did their surveys.
Oh, yeah. There is a survey. I have totally forgotten the URL. No,
Ploneconf.6feetup.com.
Ploneconf.6feetup.com. There is a survey on all the talks, I think. Yeah, I should have put it up, but the PDF doesn't fit into an HTML slide. Okay, thanks.